Cheers. Welcome to Brewing TV, Episode 3. I'm Michael Dawson.
And I'm Jake Keeler. And a river runs through it, Norman McLean said, and I'm paraphrasing here, beer used to be brewed in your town or the next town over, not St. Louis or Milwaukee.
But for a good couple of generations, beer pretty much came from St. Louis or Milwaukee. Thanks to the craft beer movement, though, that's changed, and we are at about the same number of breweries that we were before Prohibition.
Which begs the question, have we returned to the good old days? Maybe we've surpassed them.
How big of a town do you need to support a local craft beer scene? Big? Small? Unincorporated? Join us as we travel to an unlikely place to find some answers to these questions, and then meet us back here in the brew house to make an ale that you cannot get outside zip code 50459.
Sounds great. All for brew?
Brew for all. How far do you have to go for a pint of handcrafted beer? For people in some parts of northern Iowa, the answer is surprisingly not far. Northwood, Iowa has 2,000 residents and its own brew pub. That means never waiting for a table. Worth Brewing Company, named after Worth County, is owned and operated by husband and wife team Peter Ausenhuis and Margaret Bishop. Before his career as a self-made brewmaster, Peter was an award-winning home brewer and assistant brewer at Summit Brewing Company in St. Paul. We dropped in on a windy North Plains day to pick Peter's brain about the significance of local beer and the prospects of ultra small-scale brewing.
And hopefully to mooch some beer.
It's a windy day here in Northwood. I'm going to go inside and find brewmaster Peter Ausenhuis.
Sounds great. I'm going to walk around town, see what's going on, try to find a local, find out what they think of having Worth Brewing in the town.
All right.
Sounds good.
We find Peter inside his brew house. He's brewed nearly 600 batches on his Sabco system. He does it 20 gallons at a time, 2 batches of 10 gallons per fermenter. For some of you, that probably sounds sort of familiar. This rig isn't that much larger than some of your home breweries. The difference is, Peter serves beer to a whole town.
Yeah, it's basically commercial brewing on a homebrew scale. They're homebrewers who make bigger batches than I make, and so it is very small. It's very expensive way to make beer, obviously. In the time and effort it takes me to make, 160 pints of beer, even the smallest brew pub system is going to make 10 times that. The only way it can work is to have pretty low overhead. I'm in a small town here. The building's fairly cheap, and the licensing in Iowa is fairly reasonable.
Today, Peter is brewing his Sunderland Mild Ale.
Well, the inspiration was I wanted a beer that I could pour a big, full UK pint and drink, maybe during a break while I'm working, maybe not during a break while I'm working.
You were a home brewer for a long time before you opened Worth Brewing. When did you start?
I started home brewing in the 80s, about 87. Actually, it was March 87. I just didn't want to say that. It sounds too nerdy to know exactly the day I started. But I loved the hobby so much that I was consuming, and I was doing other things at the time, like most home brewers are. But eventually, it went into a livelihood.
That livelihood led him to Northwood, where 3 years ago he took over an old building that has been many things over the years, including a bank. Peter and his wife renovated it and opened Worth Brewing.
I wasn't too surprised as far as the mechanics of doing it. I'd kind of been serious as a home brewer anyway, and so the sanitation, all the things you really have to be careful about, I was already doing. The business part, we were surprised with the people drinking the beer here. We didn't know what these factory Bud Miller drinkers were going to take to this stuff and take to us as a business here. I've been very surprised to see the huge draw we get from the communities around here. We have people who drive 30 miles one way on a weekly basis just to come here and have a couple of beers. And the home brewers that have popped out of the woodwork from the surrounding communities, as I say, probably a 30, 60-mile radius we draw from, both in Iowa and Minnesota. I wanted to start a home brewing club, not necessarily sponsor one, but at least be a kind of a venue for people to come and ask questions of each other and start a club. And Iowa-Minnesota Society of Brewers, I'm an SOB, is an active group now, probably a good 12 dozen people.
It's probably a more conducive environment to talking about beer than the strip club outside Mason City, right?
Yeah, maybe not as fun, but a little more family-oriented as well. Yeah.
Worth has 5 year-round beers, including the Dillon Clock Stopper, which makes reference to a historical clock in Northwood. It's a light yet full-flavored beer. There's also an IPA, a brown ale, the mild, and an oatmeal stout. Then there are special and even mystery beers. Plus, this year's Iowa legislature increased the allowable alcohol content in Iowa brewed beers from a historic 6% up to 12%. So bring your snifter if you come to Northwood. Peter's breaking out the big beers.
I certainly will load up on some Belgian beers. I'll probably brew those during the summer when it's a little warmer. I can brew some things in the basement and store them there. I definitely want to do some Bocks, some authentic Bocks. People keep yelling for the Imperial IPAs. I hesitate just because there's so many out there, and there's so many other types I'd like to try first.
While Dawson was talking with Peter, I wanted to find out, what did this brew pub mean to the community?
So I would imagine in a town like this, or a town anywhere really, I mean, and larger cities, you've got to get community support, you've got to get a liquor license. There's a lot of hoops you have to jump through just to even start making beer, selling beer, for that matter, on a commercial scale. What was the town of Northwood's reaction when they found out, this person was going to move in, buy a building, and start brewing beer right here on Main Street?
I think a lot of people probably thought he was a little crazy. I don't know how many people that live around here had been into craft brewing. I think a very small proportion or small percentage. There's Mason City. Peter had some friends that are brewers. Albert Lee had friends that are brewers.
Right.
I think the closest brewery is Des Moines or Minneapolis.
Sure.
So to put us right in the middle with our own brewery was an out-of-the-box idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the business has been great. He's had, like I said, a lot of out-of-towners and a lot of locals that I think, like me, had never tried it and
Sure.
now are into it very much.
Other aspiring brewers have contacted and visited Peter to pick his brain and use Worth Brewing as a model on which to base their own small-scale brewing dreams. Brewing TV would love to see more places like this, maybe in your town. The last thing I want to ask you, Peter, is what is home brewing to you?
Homebrewing is, it's the ultimate creating something like out of grain. You got something nowadays. There's not a lot of things that you can make from scratch or look at raw materials and then a month later pick something up and say, I'm not sure how the best way to say it, but there's a satisfaction with being able to create something that you enjoy and that your friends enjoy and that other people appreciate. And that's a satisfaction that I suppose many hobbies could give people, but it's the one that really drew me to continuing in the hobby to make it last so long, and it's still I enjoy.
All these years later.
Mm-hmm.
Come on, cheers to that.
Yeah, cheers. Thanks very much.
Oh, that's good. All right, welcome to Time to Brew. We're going to try to reverse engineer Worth Brewing's Pale Ale, which is a really nice, well-balanced example of the American Pale Ale style. It uses Magnum for bittering, Cascade and Centennial for finishing. I'm going to keep it real local and use backyard Centennials from my house. We're squatting here at the Northern Brewer Brew Lab. It's still under construction, but we're going to use the top tier system and boil us up some nice work. right, what we're looking at here are the 3 grains in the grain bill for this recipe. Peter uses raw 2-row pale, which is here on the left. It's just a very neutral, but very nice and grainy base malt. UK caramalt in the middle, which is not an uncommon grain in a pale ale recipe. The kicker, what we might call a secret ingredient, which he still posts on the website, so it's not that secret, is Belgian Special B. That's a little bit unusual to find a dark Belgian caramel malt in a pale ale recipe. This grain you would know from Belgian doubles and other dark Belgian ales as kind of the contributor of the raisin rum-soaked flavor. Just a little bit of that in this grain bill is going to give us a really nice kind of ruby brown color and this beguiling undertone of dark caramel.
What do we got going on here?
We got the flavor edition, Mr. Keeler, some homegrown Centennial. Trade you.
All right. Nice cold spotted cow clone.
Thanks, man.
All right. Just gonna toss these in here.
I say yes.
All right, here we go.
Woo!
Yeah.
In the introduction to the 3rd edition of The Complete Joy of Homebrewing, Michael Jackson, the late beer critic, wrote, and I'm paraphrasing here, that homebrewing is a revolutionary activity. In visiting Northwood and Worth Brewing, did you feel that way?
I did. I felt like it was taking something that is rooted in history. I mean, it's something that was going on 100 years ago and still going on today on a much larger scale. If you think of a craft brewery, I always think that it's serving a larger metro area. I would never think that, you would purposefully go to a town of 1,200 people and say, I'm going to make beer for these people. I mean, A, I would say you're crazy. B, I would say that would never work. But obviously, Peter has proven that that is not true.
The cool thing about homebrewing, and as it spills over into craft brewing, is this kind of like egalitarian feeling, almost kind of like the internet, like anybody
Right.
can publish themselves and get their opinion out there. Anybody can brew their own beer and make it exactly the way they want to.
Right.
And, whether you are preserving old styles of beer that were brewed before Prohibition or just kind of like brewing for an audience of one, you can make it whatever you want, as complicated
Right.
or as simple as you
Right.
want it to be.
And how many homebrewers have always said, well, I homebrew a lot, but my friends come over and they always drink my beers. I mean, Peter's basically just saying, yeah, everybody drinks your beers. I just charge them for it.
Brewing with him on that system, like nothing felt unfamiliar. It felt,
Right.
like brewing more gallons than I usually brew at a time, but all the processes, all of the science behind it, all the ideas were the same.
And really, talking to the people in the community, it's revitalized that Main Street.
Yeah.
And in a time like this, 2010, the economy being what it is, that's what we need. I mean, if you want to get really large-scale philosophical about it, that's what this country needs is a lot more Peter Ausenhuses to bring things back to smaller communities, bring things back to a much more grassroots level. You know, maybe not think so big if you're starting to think, boy, I could start a brewery, but think small.
Hey, it's almost time for Flame Out. We should say goodbye.
Alrighty.
Thanks to Peter Ausenhus at Worth Brewing for letting us come down and mooch beer.
That's right, and thanks to our sponsor, the Brewing Network. Also, Brewing TV t-shirts are now available on the merch link at the website.
Thank you for watching. All for Brew.
And brew for all. Cheers.
Cheers. Let's get those hops.